An Islamic State car bomb in the Iraqi capital of Baghdad kills 39 people and injures 60 more on the day French President Francois Hollande visits the country to review the war on terror. ISIL also claims responsibility for the massacre at an Istanbul nightclub that left 39 people dead and dozens more wounded on New Year's Eve. Meanwhile, anti-fake news crusader The Washington Post has been accused of generating fake news itself after retracting a false story about Russia hacking America's power grid. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us this hour. My name is Neil Harvey. You're watching RT International. A suicide car bombing has rocked the Iraqi capital, Baghdad, killing at least 39 people and injuring around another 60, according to police. The attack occurred at an outdoor market located in a busy square in the northeastern part of the city. Our Middle East correspondent Paula Sleer has more.
We are hearing from Islamic State claiming responsibility for this attack. What we understand happened is that an explosive was planted in a pickup truck that was driven by an Islamic State fighter. According to local police, it entered an outdoor busy market targeting daily laborers and a police checkpoint. Now, this attack comes just 2 days after another attack killed some 27 people in Baghdad, also at a marketplace. It comes as France's President Francois Hollande is in the Iraqi capital to meet French troops that are helping government forces battle Islamic State. Government forces backed by the West resumed a large-scale offensive on the city of Mosul, which remains a key Islamic State stronghold. It is the second largest city in Iraq, and it follows the Iraqi Prime Minister earlier saying that in just 3 months the coalition forces would be able to drive Islamic State from Mosul. That operation started back in October, and the figures we have suggest that as many as 1.5 million civilians are trapped in the city of Mosul.
Earlier on, we discussed the attack and the Iraqi offensive on Mosul with Catherine Shakdam from the Shafakna Institute for Middle Eastern Studies.
Daesh militants are desperately trying to, to sow unrest, and I think that what they're doing is reverting to, the guerrilla tactics, trying to scare the population into submission. This is what they have done, for the past few years, not just in Iraq, but in Syria. For me, I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that Mosul will be liberated and the Iraqi army and the Iraqi people will reclaim their land. Now, it's very difficult to say whether it's going to take a month, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We don't know. The difficulty would be, I think, it really depends on how, those powers continue to fund terrorism will actually, handle the situation. Will they decide to kind of withdraw, understanding that, in fact, they already have lost, as Syria actually taught the world? Or is it that they will continue to push because they're trying desperately to find an enclave somewhere in the Middle East?
However, experts fear that the military operation in Mosul could lead to a problem even bigger than Islamic State itself. The Mosul Dam, Iraq's largest, is already in poor condition. And with the battle for the barrier wall now ongoing, the offensive could destroy it, causing the structure to collapse. And this could have devastating consequences for the country if indeed the worst comes to the worst. The dam itself is located 60 kilometres north of the city. It's the 4th largest such structure in the Middle East. Despite holding enormous amounts of water, as you would imagine, it's been slowly falling apart for some time. Should the dam collapse, well, the equivalent of more than 4 million Olympic-sized swimming pools would flood surrounding areas. That would put the lives of almost 1.5 million people at risk. Experts say the potential damage would be pretty similar to the effect of a nuclear explosion. Journalist Adel Darwish believes the situation is indeed extremely dangerous.
It's not easy for the engineers to work and carry out the maintenance work, which needs heavy equipment and injection underneath, and that's a very, very dangerous situation indeed. Unless you clear some kind of secure environment around the dam in order for the engineers to continue the work, it could be a real disaster there and a lot of people could lose their lives. But I think if I were them, I would even probably pause the fighting or something, divert all security around the dam area, make a clear, safe environment put all the engineers, put all the heavy machinery and heavy plant there to strengthen the dam, find a way of releasing some of the pressure of the dam, and try to build water down river, down the valley, and just as precaution, actually evacuate the areas, the small villages on the way of the water. Apart from that, I'm not quite sure what can be done.
Fake news has again hit the headlines and the hashtags after the Washington Post retracted a big story on Russian hackers penetrating the US power grid. Apparently now they didn't. The paper's added an editorial correction and changed its headline, but for some this was too little too late. Many have already accused the outlet of spreading fake news, which is supposedly used to influence various aspects of the political process. RT's Emily Sue has more on the story.
Warning, the Russian hackers are at it again. This time, the target is the electricity grid in the U.S. city of Vermont with the aim of causing a blackout in the middle of winter. At least that's what it sounded like when the Washington Post published an article cites an unnamed official who claims a malware code with links to Russian hackers was found in the company's system. It's no surprise many senior politicians fell for it.
Vermonters and all Americans should be both alarmed and outraged that one of the world's leading thugs, Vladimir Putin, has been attempting to hack our electric grid.
This is now about trying to access utilities to potentially manipulate the grid and shut it down in the middle of winter.
Well, don't blame them. Russia trying to cut out the power in an American city does sound like a scary story, except it turned out to be a work of fiction. A day later, the Post republished the article with an editorial note saying their initial accusation was false. But the new headline sounds just as scary. The Post had to make the correction after the Vermont utility company issued a statement saying that the malware code was found on one single computer that was not connected to the electrical grid, which seems to suggest that the Post didn't even bother contacting the company before publishing the article. Even the Department of Homeland Security confirmed they don't have any evidence backing the newspaper's claims. And here's where things get interesting. The Department of Homeland Security published that joint report with the FBI last Wednesday, revealing this very code, claiming they could link it to Russian hackers. But to cover their backs, they attached a disclaimer saying they couldn't guarantee any of the information included in the document. We spoke to the head of WordFence, which provides a kind of firewall for users of one of the world's biggest blog hosting websites, WordPress. He told us he tracked down the source of the code to a Ukrainian hacker group. But frankly, it could really have been anyone.
If the data in this report was used to determine that it was Russia that attacked the Vermont utility, I'd be cautious about that, because a lot of the indicators of compromise in this report can be used by anyone, because some of those hacking tools are publicly available. If you find some of the malware that's in the report on your network, it doesn't mean that you were hacked by Russia.
We weren't the only ones who spotted this dangerous pattern of churning out damning accusations against Russia without any concrete evidence. The Intercept cited another cybersecurity expert who likened the Post's accusation to the assumption that if Russian-made Kalashnikov rifles were found at a crime scene, the killer must be Russian. President-elect Donald Trump also has reservations.
It's a pretty serious charge, and I want them to be sure. And if you look at the weapons of mass destruction, that was a disaster, and they were wrong. And so I want them to be sure.
Another day, another Russian hacker allegation.
Ironically, it was the Washington Post itself that back in November first propelled the issue of fake news to the top of people's news feeds. At the time, in an article on Russia's supposed interference in the US election, it cited a little-known research group that labels 200 outlets as peddlers of Russian propaganda and producers of fake news. The outlet came under criticism for relying on a highly dubious source as evidence for its claims. Responding to the ongoing controversy over the phenomenon, Facebook has said that it will be placing alerts on news stories that are allegedly fake. The social network will rely on vetted fact-checkers from across the globe. The Washington Post is actually on that list of trustworthy outlets that can supposedly tell a true story from a fake one. We spoke to political columnist Ted Rall about the fake news craze and how readers can easily be misled by certain media outlets.
In the past, that used to always be good enough. If you said you got something out of the Washington Post or the New York Times, you know, the odds are it wasn't made up completely out of whole cloth. Just originate from hackers trying to get clicks somewhere. It can originate within the Washington Post. Back during the Soviet period, a lot of Russians didn't know what to believe. Well, now we Americans are entering a similar period. Once the initial story is out, it's very hard to expect that anybody else is going to follow up and hear the truth. I mean, you know, it's like the Article 1 appears, it's wrong. People who saw that, then some of them go on vacation. They never see Article number 2 for whatever reason. The odds of someone seeing the follow-up retraction are basically less than 1%. And so, yeah, the damage is done. What we really have is a few newspapers, namely the New York Times and the Washington Post, that historically and at present have uncomfortably close ties to the CIA, and they've been leaking these stories, or I should say more to the point, they've been framing stories that are ostensibly based on unsubstantiated leaks. And what happens with the rest of the media is that they're just going along because, hey, if the Washington Post and the New York Times says it, it must be true, and then it sort of goes viral.
Along with fake news, another, I suppose you could say, opposite trend emerged last year. Time and again, people woke up to real news they simply couldn't believe. Ilya Petrenko reviews the biggest shockers of 2016.
We've all been through it. The alarm goes off, getting out of bed is mission impossible, and you think, what the hell happened last night? Leave aside the 2.84356 whatever billion hangovers in 2016. Last year, we had a few dates in the calendar when millions and millions of folks around the world had just that feeling.
What the happened last night?
But it wasn't booze, it was news. Check out these three. Morning, June 24th, just after the Brexit vote. Really? Guys, no more EU? Nigel Boris and co. actually nailed it?
The decision by British voters to leave the European Union, it was a shocking decision.
A stunning result, deciding to leave the European Union, to go it alone.
Surprise, surprise. But what got so many Brits and Europeans intoxicated earlier into believing the UK would say stay, full stop? The polls? Guess they didn't ask that silent majority, and they'd really had one too many from Brussels. Then there was also, not exactly the morning, but more like the night of July 15th. Like when you fall asleep at a party, open your eyes, and everything around you has gone nuts. That Turkey coup attempt, remember? Fighter jets starting about the skies over the biggest cities. President Erdogan addressing the nation on FaceTime. Yeah, that was something. It could have been constitutionally cataclysmic, sending shockwaves around the whole world, but got nipped in the bud pretty fast. Wonder if Mr. Erdogan got a tip-off? And the #1 what the hell just happened news moment of the year? Yes, you guessed it.
Liberal media so upset, visibly upset, about Donald Trump's victory.
The world's shining light of democracy has gone dark.
You're not having a terrible, terrible dream.
Do you get how badly they screwed up? A seemingly unstoppable juggernaut. The Clintons, the media, Wall Street, all very much taken by surprise. It was their endeavor on all fronts that backfired just after November 8th, with the biggest news bombshell of the year. Donald Trump will take over at the White House. Oh yeah, 2016 was full of intoxications/news sensations. You reckon 2017 is gonna be as wild? Watch this space.
Thanks for staying with us. After the break, we'll bring you latest developments from Istanbul. That's in the wake of the New Year's Eve nightclub massacre there. Stay with us.